day is it, Shannon?
Today is Tuesday.
Thank you very much.
February
Bob
1st.
It's John Shannon. Oh, it's a new month too.
Yeah. Groundhog Day tomorrow. You know what that means? 3 more days of podcasts.
Pass. It's Mckinnon and Shannon with you on the program, both the podcast and on Sirius XM. Hockey pucks today.
Yeah. 2
of our pals, Mike Zeisberger of NHL.com, Paul Dupont of the Boston Globe. And what will we talk about? God only knows. But stick around and you will find out. We'll be back and commence after these messages. All right, we're back. Some hockey talk on this program, I assume, with these guests. Mike Zeisberger of NHL.com, Paul Dupont of the Boston Globe, recent award winner as best sports writer in the world.
Or at least Massachusetts.
Same thing.
No. Yeah, he said the world.
So now, Bob, you used to call these guys
stained wretches.
Stained wretches. What do you call them now?
Ink-stained wretches.
Yeah, but neither of these guys. Well, Kevin probably. Do you still get it subscribed, Kevin? Does the Globe show up at the door every day?
Oh yes. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Well, you don't work off a typewriter anymore, do you?
Carbon paper.
Keyboard jockeys. Yeah.
Z, did you ever work with carbon paper?
No, and I have to say I'm not ink stained, but I'll be a wretch through and through.
One of our best ink-stained wretches wrote his last column last night, Mark Wicker, the Orange.
Oh, my.
Wow.
And very much a friend of hockey, which I was disappointed to see. Although it's his last column for Orange County, he didn't say where he goes from here.
That's like Sam Carchidi in Philadelphia. He said, I'm leaving the Inquirer, and next day he's pumped out 6 more stories on a website.
Right. Well, you never know.
Well, speaking of typewriters, I'm not to get this conversation off to a hazardous beginning, but
click.
Yeah, well,
let me get my hazmat suit.
well, no, wait a sec. So the 4 of us are all probably old enough that when we started scribbling, we worked off a typewriter. I mean, I remember being at Global Television in the 80s and writing my script on a typewriter.
Did you say the 40s?
The 80s.
Oh,
up yours, Shannon. I mean, did you guys start on typewriters?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, it was still sort of a mission to get a really good portable. Royal made them. I mean, the issue was, they were heavy to lug on the road. So Olivetti had a beautiful one. It didn't work so great, but it was very, low profile, stylized, light.
That was status in the press box, huh, Kevin?
That's right. In the office, Underwood was great. These were the standard size.
Yep.
Underwood, Royal, but to find a real nice touch typewriter was everything, and that, and make sure you had your box of carbon paper alongside.
Absolutely. Z?
I never had to do that. I mean, we used typewriters in school. When I joined the Sun, they had the first kind of generation of the Radio Shack laptops with the LCD printouts. And real quick story, I remember one of the first NHL games I got to cover was in Buffalo at the Old Odd. And the way you would send your stories at the time was by couplers, these kind of plastic rubber cups that you would put over the phone.
On the phone, right.
Yes. Sure. Well, they were also sensitive to sound. So here I am covering my first NHL game, and I press send and it's going through. And the Sabres score into an empty net. And at that time, the only 2 buildings that had horns go off when they scored was the Chicago Stadium and Memorial Auditorium in Buffalo. So the damn horn goes off, and all of a sudden my story quits sending because it, the noise, the sound would keep those stories from getting in. And that was kind of like, my boss called me the next day and said, "Welcome to baptism by fire, kid."
Yeah.
So let me, Kevin, I would assume, or maybe Mike, you did this too, is you would do your story. I know this is mundane stuff for lots of people. You would do your story, go to the room.
Especially those that read it.
Well, you'd go to the room after you'd done your story and then phone in the quotes. Is that correct, Kevin?
No, typically not. You were writing it in real time, and so the game would end. You'd go down to the room. You'd come back up. You'd write from top down, as we say, top down, with quotes involved, and then you would hand it off to a contractor. One of the services was called CanFax.
Sure.
And then they would fax it over by phone. But I can tell you, one of my more harrowing nights was in '78. I covered the last two legs of the Triple Crown. Aladar affirmed. So there was no, you were writing from top to bottom, but you were handing off each take or each page to the CanFax service in the press box in Elmont. Well, I don't know how many of us were there. There must have been at least 100 people writing on deadline, handing over to the fax guy. And if you didn't have that carbon, as I did not, if they lost the take, you were out of luck. And sure enough, they lost my second take or my second page of that story. And it's kind of hard to look at your first page and your third page and say, all right, what were the 300 words I used here?
Connect the dots.
Yeah, but that was the process. So it's so incredibly easy now. That part of the job is so incredibly easy now because you've got your laptop and you can cut and paste and move stuff around. Whereas in the old days, you'd tap out your name, you'd be would you a sentence and a half into it, you don't like it, pull it out of the crib, mash it up, roll again, start again.
Kev, I think that was the last time we were allowed in dressing rooms, wasn't it, to talk to players?
Yeah, almost.
Yeah, the last time, I might say.
So the presumption is, I don't even know how we got on this. My fault. The presumption would be that guys like you covering an event, you are on deadline, but you would, at the game would end, you'd go get your quotes, and you'd sit down and write your story. But that's not really how it worked most of the time. You'd be writing during the game, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and actually, Bob, say you're writing a baseball game, you would pretty much write the bottom first, so the bottom 2/3 first, and then put the top of it on when the game ended. So, the way it worked is after 6 innings, you kind of do a description. The two teams came in with on a winning streak, yada, 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 describe the first 6 innings, send that into the office, and then they would wait for the game to end, and you would write a top, and then they would put the top on top of the body of work that you would send in about an hour earlier. I mean, that sounds bass-ackwards, but that's the way that you had to do it because they needed it the second the game was over.
Well, one of the other things that changed during both your careers, I guess, was the disappearance of the afternoon newspaper, right?
Yeah.
So, the notion of not really having a hard deadline or a deadline that was difficult to meet after a game, especially a late game, well, that changed completely because now you've got, when did they start to run a print? About what time would a morning paper start running prints?
I actually was never, the Toronto Sun, by the time I got there out of school, they were already the evening paper in terms of, 10:30, 11 o'clock was the first deadline. So you had to get it out. Then there was a 12 o'clock deadline and a 1 o'clock deadline. So we used to joke that if you were on the West Coast, the only people that would see your game story were people that if they looked out the window could see the Toronto Sun building.
Yeah. What about you, KP?
Same thing. Yeah, I never worked for the Globe. Had an afternoon paper of about the Boston, the Evening Globe, around 300,000. This is when the daily was around 500,000, and the weekend, the Sunday paper was approaching 900,000. So I didn't get to work for that. Well, I did sometimes, but as a kid. But that's a great luxury if you're the writer. You're an event that ends at say let's say 11 p.m. and you don't have your copy due until 11 a.m. Mm-hmm. Whereas those of us working for the morning product have to hit usually 9:30 or 10 p.m. deadline, usually before the game is over, and then replates. They'll replate the paper a couple of times. But I don't know, Z, and the guy, I don't know how you feel about this, Z. A lot of times you feel better to have less time because you just have to get it done.
Yeah, and I'm not going to name any names, but, you'd be on the road with some of the, grizzled veterans who would kind of show you the ropes. And when they didn't have to write till the next morning and you're in Chicago or New York, I mean, what could possibly go wrong, Bob?
Well, I hijacked the conversation. John, bring us back to where we should be, which is hockey talk.
Okay, so and really at the top of my list was the best team in hockey right now. I assume everybody agrees is the Colorado Avalanche, and they are 18, I think, in a row at home, undefeated. And the Bruins were there earlier this week, Kevin, or in the last week. What makes them so good right now?
Well, the distinguishing factor is up front Mckinnon and in back Makar, for my money. I mean, two terrific players. In the game the Bruins played, they lost Mckinnon early, second shift, and then by the end of two periods, Bruins had a 3-1 lead and then booted it away. So yeah, right now, and I say this with probably not giving enough credit to Florida, but right now you'd have to say Colorado's the favorite. They're just, they've got an elite pack of forwards up there. Goaltending, I suppose, could be a wrinkle, and part of what I wrote for this morning was, they look like the deadlock for the Cup, which is what I said about San Jose all those years. I got that right. So
I was just going to say it is January. Well, it's February now, but don't hold your breath on Colorado. I mean, all you guys picked Colorado at the beginning of the year, and they are the San Jose Sharks right now of the 2020s. A team with plenty of talent that everybody picks year after year after year, and they haven't got it done. And I think you hit the other nail on the head. Their goaltending is the question, and we all know that when you get to the playoffs, you better have a puck stopper. Z?
Well, I mean, first of all, Bob, it's not just this year. Some of us
I know.
Guards for the last 3 years. Okay.
I know.
Let me get this right. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I got that right. The last 3 years, I have picked these guys to go to the final against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Thank you, John Cooper, for making me 50% right, which is a hell of a lot more than I'm usually right. So, now is the time. There's no excuses for Colorado. I mean, I understand what you guys are talking about goaltending, but everybody was up in arms when they lost Grubauer. What are they going to do? Well, Grubauer is not actually having a great year in Seattle. That's for sure. I understand it's an expansion team, but look at his numbers. I'm not so down on their goaltending. I think that Kemper will be fine, but he's not playoff proven, so that's going to be an issue. But, I mean, this team is just oozing with talent. I mean, you could talk about McKinnon, but, I mean, Nazem Kadri just got voted the NHL Player of the Week. You've got Rantanen, so many players there. And on the back end, too, a guy like Gerard, very, very good defenseman, Taves. So, this is a complete team, but it takes more than that to get over that hump. And I think everybody now is getting to the point that, okay, Colorado, we're not going to believe it until you go out there and show it to us. Kind of like in a different way, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, whatever kind of regular season they have, they're not going to be gauged until April. And I think the same is with the Colorado Avalanche, except for Colorado, they've won series, but it's time to get to the Western Conference Final and the Stanley Cup final.
Okay. But I think that you've now reinforced something that both Kevin and Bob have talked about. And as I have more faith in Jack Campbell than I do Darcy Kemper. I really do. And maybe I've seen Campbell play enough games. But if you're sitting in the room, Mike, with Joe Sakic, and he's saying, okay, Mike, you're my guy. What are we doing? Do we need a new goaltender? You're going to say no?
I'm fine with Kemper. Let me ask you this, John. everybody seemed to be all in on Grubauer last year. Had he really proven himself before last year? No. So I don't really think that there's been a decline in their goaltending. So I don't understand why there's more. I don't know why the spotlight is more on Kemper this year than it was on Grubauer last year, because I don't see a decline in their goaltending.
I think that reason is they are so complete up front. They are so complete on the blue line. There has to be, I think there's people saying there has to be a flaw somewhere, so it's going to be the goalie.
Well, you brought up Jack Campbell. How many playoff series he won in his career?
Oh, no, you're right. No, I understand. But we're not on the Leafs yet. We're talking about. I just want to make sure
the name up.
You're on the record
back into your court.
You're on the record of you're not changing the Avalanche at all before the trade deadline.
But what I'd add to the conversation here is that, and this may be a mistake, but if we look at those great Oiler teams that were high flying and could score, and we see parts of that in Colorado, we see parts of it in Florida too. Mm-hmm. But when it came crunch time, they locked it down. They had the weight on the back line despite Coffey and all that. And they did have a Hall of Fame goaltender in Grant Fuhr, granted. But I thought the crux of those championships was the ability to shift gears and play, if you will, playoff hockey. Sure. Add weight to the back line and tie it up. And do I think Colorado can do that? I'd have my doubts. I'd have my doubts about Toronto. The only one I don't have my doubts about is this is easy, of course, Tampa, because we've seen it from them. So I don't know if it's so much we have to be fixated on whether they actually have the goaltender. Do they have adequate goaltending? I suppose they do. The question is, can they do it front to back, forwards and defense, and just change style?
So if you look at the West, I do think that the biggest challenge in the West for Colorado, St. Louis, but they've been a little inconsistent of late, and Vegas. And I think we're all holding our breath waiting for Jack Eichel to show up, thinking that it will make a difference. Kevin, will it make a difference?
I like Eichel a lot. Obviously the first obvious comment is we haven't seen him. We don't know. We don't know how he's going to hold up to the beating. It is at least a risky, somewhat controversial operation he underwent. So we'll see there. They'll be better. I don't know if he's a tipping point for them, but he'll make them better, provided he's Eichel.
Right, Mike.
Well, I mean, if you look at it now with Eichel, there's two things here. Number one, okay, so your top three forwards, I think we'll all agree, are going to be Pacioretty, Stone, and Eichel. One guy hasn't played in a year? Mm-hmm. And the other two guys have been injured. These are not spring chickens we're talking about in terms of Stone and Pacioretty. Don't get me wrong, they're not out of their prime. But health is going to be a hell of a big issue with these guys. If they can stay healthy, I mean, that top three is as good as anybody. But there's another factor in this, is that they are going to have to subtract to add. And I'm not sure how the cap situation works. I'm not sure if it's contingent on how late Eichel joins in the season. Mm-hmm. But it seems fairly evident that they're going to have to shed some salary in order to fit Eichel in. And this is nothing new for Vegas, guys, because remember last year after they signed Pietrangelo, because of cap restrictions, there were actually a few games where they could not ice a full team in terms of that 20-man roster. They had to go into games with 19 or 18 players because they couldn't fit a roster of 20 in under the cap. So I think that's going to be an issue for them too. Where do they create this cap room to fit all these big money guys in?
Well, one of the other things that we talk about from time to time is teams who have other teams' numbers. And I don't know whether there's any validity to that in a year-to-year basis as time passes, but Vegas certainly has had Colorado's number.
Yeah.
And do you think that matters? Is every year different? Or is our memories long?
Well, having grown up with Canadiens Bruins, I would say history can hold.
By the way, Kev, if you're talking about the 70s Canadiens, every other team felt that way too against the 70s.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, very good point. Very good point. It certainly doesn't hold like it used to because of free agency, because of roster changeover, all of that. But I suppose, in the consciousness of the fans, it certainly does. I don't feel it so much anymore. Though I somewhat offer this half sarcastically. Those teams didn't have Kadri, right? And Kadri has had a hell of a year. Of course, he was a great X factor for the Bruins. He took Leafs out of two consecutive series.
Yes, he did.
18 and 19 because stupid plays. I'll go into this wondering if he's capable of it again.
Okay, Mike, you're back in the general manager's room with Joe Sakic, and he's going to turn to you and say, "Oh, what are we going to do with Naz? What are we doing with Naz? Unrestricted free agent, career year, top 3 in scoring in the National Hockey League this year. He's been the constant. He's been the one that has really driven the boat so many times because everybody else on that team has been injured or suspended at some point or in COVID protocol. What do you do? What are you paying Kadri? And can Colorado afford him now based on cap issues?"
Well, number one, if I'm Joe Sakic, thank you for all the work that Nazem Kadri has done. You have Cale Makar locked up, okay? We all know that Nathan McKinnon is one of the best bargains in the league. I think his deal is just over $6 million, I believe.
Yep.
You'd love to have Kadri back. There's no way you can go forward without having Nathan McKinnon locked up long-term, whether it's this year, whether it's next year. To me, he doesn't get talked about enough, but when he's healthy, I think that he has the potential to be a generational player, a franchise player, which he already is. There's no way you can let this guy go. So you have to have the foresight and say, yeah, Kadri's been good. I mean, he's having a career season this year. He's been great for the team, but can we, if we sign this guy long-term, how is that going to affect the way our ability to re-sign Nathan McKinnon? You have to sign Nathan McKinnon. If that means losing Nazem Kadri, so be it. And let's not forget another thing, John. I mean, Kev brought this up about how he was suspended twice in those Leaf series against the Boston Bruins. He's also had a playoff suspension for the Colorado Avalanche. So, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. What does it say when you get fooled the third time? So I'm going to be interested to see how he can keep his composure if he can in the playoffs.
By the way, so the McKinnon contract has one more year after this year at $685.
So you have to look forward to that.
They can actually sign if they're smart. They could actually try to sign both guys this summer, right? You can extend Nathan McKinnon after July 15th or whatever when the fiscal year ends.
How old is Kadri now?
Kadri's going to be 32 at the start of next season. So,
John, you gotta the way that he plays.
Oh, I know.
Plays a physical type of game. We've seen the tread come off the tires really quick when guys start getting into their mid-30s.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Bill Guerin, a prime example of this when he left Boston for Dallas. You go to that age 31. There's typically a cutoff with guys that age. So, you're staring at. I suppose, based on the year he's had, he can ask for anything, right? But I think probably realistically, a guy with this kind of year is probably looking at 5 years, 30 million. He may be looking at 5 years, 40 million. I don't, in terms of his ask. Do I want to invest that in him? No, I don't.
Kevin, he's got a new agent. His name is Darren Ferris. Darren Ferris is the most vigilant, and I say this in the most complimentary way, the most vigilant agent on the planet right now. He's never afraid to hold the guys out. I think, and I mean, the biggest issue for me on Kadri is going to be what the term is. I think teams will match the number. I think the number will be fine. And I think it's more than 7, maybe even 8. But the question will be, is he going to get 8 at 3 years or 4 or 5 or hey, heck, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be in my mind, I don't know about you, Mike, but that's going to be the biggest issue.
John, for me, and I'm a big Kadri fan, and somebody's going to give him that. But is he an $8 million player at 32 years old? If we look at his body of work, really?
Yeah, well, I don't think so.
Well, but that's going to be the discussion. And we're also dealing with, particularly this year, with so many games of hockey-related revenue, with like in Ottawa last night or Toronto last night, 500 people in the building. Exactly. The cap's not going anywhere.
Correct.
It's not going anywhere. So how you're going to find that type of money? It's going to be one. I think one of the big stories of the summer is what happens to these unrestricted free agents. And to me, Kadri's at the top of the list.
I think what's going to happen to him is not unlike what happened to Taylor Hall when he found Buffalo as a safe harbor for 1 year at $8 million. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody's going to lay out that kind of term. I think you might find a club go 2 or 3 years at a real number. But again, I don't think the real number, even in Taylor Hall's day at $8 million, that's not a real number now because of everything you've brought up there, John. The market's retreating.
Yeah.
It may be in retreat here for 2 or 3 or 4 years.
And you know, Kev, everything is in front of Kadri. I mean, he is the architect of his own future right now. He's having a career year. You mentioned about Colorado, that the way they have to play from back to front when things tighten up. And that's the vision the Leafs had for him. When the Leafs signed John Tavares, the image that they had in their head to go up against the Boston Bruins was, well, now we have John Tavares, Austin Matthews, and Nazem Kadri. Those are our top 3 centers. Who can match up against them? And you know what? It was great on paper until Kadri got suspended.
Yeah.
So when you start going up against the Vegases and teams that you mentioned, the St. Louis's, that we think are going to be the big kind of challengers for Colorado. I mean, this guy can be the most effective player on the ice if he stays on the ice. And again, I mean, I hate to bring up his history, but this is 3 times in the playoffs where he's hurt his team. And if he shows that he's mature enough that he can turn that negative into a positive, then, hey, guys, we all know, and it's not just in this sport, it's in baseball, it's in football. There's always going to be one owner that's going to throw out a stupid contract there. Not stupid for the player, but stupid for our purposes on this show.
We got to take the break. We're a little late. We're going to come back, though, and chat some more hockey. Back after these messages. It's Mckinnon, it's Shannon, Mike Zeisberger, KP Dupont with us. We spent a lot of time talking about Colorado, and I will say this much. I know McKinnon's got a couple of years left, but when you're talking about Kadri's contract, Colorado's thinking about what they're going to have to pay McKinnon, and that's going to start with a 1. I don't think anybody questions that, right?
You think he's going to be? You think he's a $10 million guy?
I think they're going to pay him that. I think and it might be 11. It could even be 12.
You don't, John?
I don't know. Wow. I mean, whether they have been.
If this guy was playing in a bigger market, people would understand how electrifying this guy is.
I'm not doubting that. I just, Joe Sakic was the quiet superstar himself. He always took less, even though he got that $50 million signing bonus from Neil Smith, and Colorado had to match it. He always took less to stay in Denver because of the market, because it was a different place to live. I wonder if he's going to be able to convince McKinnon of that.
I think, John, if he gets $10 million, he is taking a hometown discount.
I do too.
For what he's worth on the open market.
What do you think, Kevin?
Love him. Yeah, I mean, I love the whole package. If you're paying a guy 10 million, easy for me to say, paying a guy 10 million, you want him to be a 100-point guy, a 110-point guy. He's not that, but he's the perfect case of, you don't have to deliver. He delivers great numbers, but you don't have to be. And again, it's all sort of vagaries of the market. Look at the number Eichel got from Buffalo when he was so young.
Yeah, so, but that was ownership silliness.
Sure, and as I suppose every contract of $10 million or better has some silliness in it, but again, given what the market dynamics are, and the drop in revenue. But
Jeff, I think he is a 110 point player when he's healthy, or possibly.
But that's
I really do.
That's the issue. Is, I mean, when you pay that kind of money, are you paying for durability too?
I don't know.
Well, hopefully,
the Knights and Jack Eichel.
Oh no, for the Eichel one, yeah, no, I was thinking McKinnon still. Sorry.
No, I know, but I'm just saying. I mean, who would you rather be paying $10 million to?
Oh no question. No, there's no question. To Nathan McKinnon.
So it's all about consistency, character, durability, intelligence. Does he galvanize a room? Does he not blow up a playoff series in game 2? All of that.
Well, all this talk about Colorado, and it's valid, and I respect that they deserve to be talked about at or near the top. And we've mentioned Tampa. Anytime you've got a team that has had the kind of long-term success that Tampa has, you tend to ignore them, and it's just kind of a given. But they're doing what they do every year.
Mm-hmm.
They're at or near the top of the standings, and you can't preclude the possibility that they can win another one. Absolutely. In fact, I think you might have to make them the favorite going into the playoffs if we started right now.
They might not get out of the first round in that division.
Well, they might not, but that's another question.
But Tampa's playing Toronto right now in the first round.
Yeah, well, then Toronto probably won't get out of the first
round.
Well,
that's welcome to the Atlantic.
Well, all right. I wanted to talk a little bit about Carolina,
yes,
who we've mentioned, who are really good, and Florida,
yep,
who are, I think they're as good as anybody. Is experience going to be an issue for either Carolina or Florida, given that the vast majority of their guys have not been down the road very far?
Well, I'm not sure about playoff experience or on ice experience, Bob, but I got to say this. Kudos to the guys in the room in Florida for the character they're showing, because let's not forget, they're only a couple months removed from Joel Quenneville having to leave that team, Andrew Brunette stepping in. They have not missed a step with this coaching change, with all the stuff that was kind of looming around that, with all the publicity, although I would say that Florida doesn't get any publicity anytime. So it's kind of, at that point, kind of sucked for them that they finally get publicity and it's bad, but they haven't missed a step. And good on Brunette, good on the organization. Sergei Bobrovsky, who was not very good last year, has really rebounded. And some of the guys that they brought in, Reinhart having a big year, Mason Marchment 6 points last night, that hell of a game. So I just give them credit for the whole way that they've kept this thing together in a situation that could have derailed itself a couple months ago.
It's just words, but I would say, Carolina's good.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Colorado is very good.
Mm-hmm.
Florida is scary. And maybe it's because it's happened pretty quickly and we don't have enough experience in watching them be this good.
Yeah.
But they're really good.
Let me ask you guys this. Is Jonathan Huberdeau the best player we don't talk about, that no one talks about?
He's one of them, isn't he?
Maybe.
And Barkov might be the other one.
Might be.
Yeah.
So, no, they've got a lot. And, on that kudos list, I would say the job Zito has done there as GM, masterful in terms of picking up guys, adding the right ingredients. Their vulnerability to me, they score by the bucketful, or at least they have of late anyway. I think their vulnerability is again on the back end here. They've got Ekblad. What's going to be the distinguishing factor for them, I think, is what does Zito add here on the back line?
Mm-hmm.
And he's got parts he can wheel. So he's got maneuverability. But right now, would I rather have Vasilevsky, Hedman, Sergachev? Yeah, that feels better to me than these guys right now.
But you got to think. You have to think that when you're talking about that blue line, listen, Bill Zito's an aggressive man. He's become an aggressive manager. He's not afraid. Is that the name comes to mind for me for them? Kevin is Jacob Chychrun. You know, Jacob Chychrun is sitting and wallowing in Arizona. Arizona's trying to get rid of him. Who's going to give Arizona and Bill Armstrong the right price? And by the way, the Chycruns live in Florida. His old man's doing TV there now for the Panthers. So there's a little bit of logic in the rich getting richer this year with Jacob Chychrun probably, and Florida probably being on that final list of teams that could acquire him.
So what you're saying is Dad may have subtly gone up to Zito and said, "Hey,
I don't think Bill Zito needs any prompting."
Well, and our pal Dale Talon put together for the most part, a pretty good team in Chicago. Yep. Then got fired, and they wound up winning a bunch of Stanley Cups. Is the same thing appropriate here? I mean, because Talon's fingerprints are still all over this Florida team.
Absolutely, yeah, and the goaltender was an overpay at the time. Of course, if the goaltender ends up winning 2 cups for you, that's not an overpay. But I thought they gave Bobrovsky too much money. But yeah, the drafting was there. From everything I hear with it, there was real dysfunction between Talon and ownership, and I'm led to believe led to his demise. Not so much the architecture or the possibility. Just basic bad communication.
We've only got about 5 minutes here, but I want to talk about something that was sort of mentioned, and that is, Tampa, Florida, Toronto, who knows who else? Boston, I would think. Yeah, well, almost guaranteed. This NHL system of how the first 2 rounds go, where they mandate who plays who rather than putting everybody in a ranking 1 to 8, and then saying 1 plays 8, et cetera, et cetera. This is the only league that does it this way, really. Is this unfair? Kevin, to you.
Well, it's contrived, whether it's unfair or not. I don't like it. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Me neither.
Again, a contrivancy, and I would much rather see 1 through 8. And again, there's because of the cap and the whole emphasis on parity and all of that, I could easily be talked into 1 through 16 and not worry about East versus West. I mean, night after night we say with the
then we'd lose a trophy. Come on.
They don't want to touch, right?
Yeah.
We night after night we talk about, all we care about is that they get the call right. This is on ice with penalties, and they can go to the video. Well, in the end, what we care about most is the 2 best teams play for the cup, and that can be the case, but you get a better case for that if you go 1 to 16.
Here.
I'd support 1-8, but you'll go ahead, Mike. What do you want?
No, I would just say, do the 2 best teams in football play in the Super Bowl every year?
No, they don't.
Well, they don't. I'm not as hard a stance as you guys are, because I understand that the league is trying to promote rivalries, and maybe that's not such a big deal in Boston. Maybe that's not such a big deal in Toronto. But when you go into some of those markets, hey guys, look at the most difficult series that the Tampa Bay Lightning had last year was the first round, the Florida Panthers. That series in itself, for the market, almost re-energized the Panthers franchise, put them on the map. And I think that those things are important. Hey, look, and I'm going to go back to football, okay? You got some crappy divisions in football, okay? For years, there were the Patriots, and then there were the three other dumpster fires in that division.
But wait a sec. I'm going to interrupt you because you can't comparing the NHL, the NBA, or Major League Baseball to the NFL is a ridiculous argument because they only play 17 games now.
Yeah. But teams with losing records have got into the playoffs, Bob.
And it's one and done.
Exactly. The Toronto Maple Leafs didn't have a rivalry with the Ottawa Senators until they met a couple times in the playoffs.
Exactly.
Playoff.
And that's what they're trying to get.
But it's not geographic. It happened to be geographical by accident. The fact of the matter is that if the Boston Bruins had a 7-game dynamic series with the Seattle Kraken, would there be some kind of perceived rivalry between the two of them in the subsequent years? Of course there would.
Right.
The memory is of the playoff rivalries, not the nonsense that goes on during the regular season. That is of no consequence. And it doesn't matter whether it's a geographical rivalry.
You're making my point for me.
Well, what is your point? I don't know what it is. That's the dilemma that I have, as usual.
They're trying to get divisional rivalries heated up in this way.
It means nothing. It's contrived
regularly in the playoffs.
It's contrived. You want the best team to have if you have a good record during the regular season, you should have the advantage of playing the weakest team possible. And that's why the 1 through 8 or even 1 through 16, nobody does that, but everybody seeds teams going into the playoffs, except the National Hockey League only seeds within a space that's this big.
Yeah. And one of the reasons too, is that this system has been created was at a time when you played in your own division 6 or 8 times. And so there was that thinking that the regional nature of each division would help us. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. The NHL, and it was when I was there, we decided that every team had to play in every building, home and home. So then by the time you finished, you're only playing in your own division 4 times, 2 away, 2. So I think you're better to do it in the conference. I think it would, because I think, Mike, to your point, I agree. Florida, Tampa is a great rivalry, but I'd like to see it if they're the 2 best teams in the conference final. I don't want to see it in the first round. I want to see it in the 3rd round.
Correct.
And so the scheduling has changed so much that the divisions aren't as important anymore. The days of Lou Lamoriello saying, I want to play the Rangers and the Islanders 4 times in my building, 4 times in their building, those days are gone now. And because that was one of the driving forces. I think we're better to do it conference-wise, 1 versus 8. And then, I think you're going to get a better chance to create more rivalries in the conference than we have now. And I think that would be a better solution.
Well, it's a better first step. I would agree with that, because if you're a Ranger fan and they go, I didn't even know what the numbers are this morning. If it's Rangers Pittsburgh in round 1, I've seen this. I've seen it too many times. I would much rather, as a Ranger fan, see them against Vegas. Give me something different. Let's
you're going.
We did what the Bruins, Kevin.
Yeah, the 116. I'm old enough to remember. I think you were too, Kevin. I was part of the couple of those years. I think they only did it for 2, and it was a pain. I did a Vancouver Philadelphia first round series. Vancouver Philadelphia. You ever try to get to Vancouver Philadelphia and then get ready for another game? No, this is before charters, but gosh, it wasn't really much fun to do it logistically more than anything else.
Which leads to, as Kevin can attest, the 2011 Stanley Cup final, it ain't easy to get from Boston to Vancouver.
But either. I'll tell you what, I tell you what, to reinforce Bob's point in all this, if you talk to people in Vancouver, the Bruins are still a huge rival right now.
Yeah,
the Bruins are hated
because of a Stanley Cup final from how many years ago?
11 years ago.
There you go.
Right.
Well,
the other thing that I'd like to see them remedy here is that while we're on this topic of, if it's a pain in an ass for us as the media, it should be for everybody, is go to a 2-3-2 format.
Oh, I hate that.
Why?
Because I do think at home, I do think at home that I don't want to see a team. You could split the first two games and then go home and sweep. And I don't like that. I want to be as fair as possible.
Look at this whole conversation about travel is an absurd one, because 99.9999999% of the people that are going to watch these games do not work in the media and do not have to worry about the travel.
No, I'm not talking about travel. I'm talking.
There are like 100 people that are going to bitch and complain about travel.
2-3-2 is home ice to me is a disproportionate emphasis on home ice advantage. Because if you are the higher seeded team, you're not getting rewarded enough for being the highest seeded team, because the lower seeded team is going to have 3 consecutive games at home.
On the same hand, you're putting the players through a lot to go 2-3-2 and bounce back and forth constantly when you want best hockey and everybody's tired.
Well, here's an interesting one, and
everybody charters.
Bill Waters, my former co-host from many, many years ago, for coming up with this one. So if you go 2-3-2, allow the team with the better record to choose whether it wants to be the 2 or the 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to play 4 games in their building, 2 at the beginning, and then play 3 in a row at home? Or do you want to be the team that plays 2 at the beginning and 2 at the end?
This is where the general manager and the owner might disagree, because the general manager might want 2-3-2 and the owner might want 4 home dates.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you like to see that fight?
I'm just disappointed Waters finally came up with a good idea and I missed it.
Yeah.
Oh.
If I see him, I'll let him know. But I remember that. I remember we talked about that endlessly, and it was really kind of out of the blue. And it was, it's pretty interesting.
Great idea.
You know, I think we got to get out of here. We got plenty of time left in this hockey season to address things that will happen between now and March or April or May or whenever they start the playoffs. And we have an Olympic thing to go through too. Whatever that looks like for the National Hockey League. But boys, always interesting, always informative. We thank you very much, and stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Be good, laddies.
Thanks, guys.
Zeisberger, Dupont, we'll come back with more after these messages. Well, and we're back. And again, our thanks to Dupont and Zeisberger.
And nothing resolved about the playoffs. Nothing.
Well, I think we resolved that we all agree that the playoff format is crap and unfair. And you know, it's not about being a fan of any particular team, but like Florida, Toronto, Tampa are 3 of the 6 best teams in the National Hockey League by record.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 3 of the 5 best. And 2 of them are going to be gone after 2 rounds, correct?
Yeah.
And that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and what it puts in perspectives the plight of a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs, who might be good for 82, but can they ratchet it up and play playoff hockey against right now? If the playoffs started today, it would be Tampa. And dare I say, if you're a gambling man, and I am not, wouldn't Tampa be the favorite?
Oh, a big favorite.
Yeah.
And Florida would be a favorite, even though they don't have the experience at this level. And the Boston Bruins would be a favorite over the Toronto Maple Leafs, in spite of the fact that
you wonder about that. You wonder about that. They shouldn't be.
Well, they shouldn't be by record and by performance, but given history.
Yeah, I know. Well, and
would you bet against Boston in a series against Toronto?
No, I wouldn't.
Me neither.
The only question there, and it was a theme of our discussion a little bit, was where's the Bruins goaltending? You know, Tuukka Rask's come back and been ineffective. Linus Ullmark, is he good enough? He doesn't have much experience. I mean, their young guy Swayman, who's got no playoff experience, might be their best goalie in the long term.
But the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to rely on Campbell, who has no playoff experience.
That's right. No,
Mrazek right. has been really.
Don't even.
I know, but you can't go. You're not going to go there in the playoffs.
No, it's Jack Campbell. An option. It's Jack Campbell first, Jack Campbell second.
And we're not trying to be critical. He's had a good year overall, though he's struggled the last few games. But I don't know. Playoff hockey is different.
Yeah, I always ask this question: if you're sitting there and the playoffs start, would you rather have Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron or Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews?
Well, is it 82 or 7?
It's 7.
How many games am I playing?
Well, it's first to 4.
I'm going to go with the Boston guys just because out of experience.
So am I. Yeah.
Real quickly, Toronto Raptors won a couple of pretty big road games.
Wow. Atlanta's not very good though, Bob.
Well, but Atlanta won 7 or 9 in a row.
Yeah.
Like now, their best player didn't play last night, and that's an asterisk. I'm
just amazed.
Miami's the number one team.
I'm amazed that Toronto was able to field a team last night after playing 55 minutes. Starting lineup.
So, and then Nurse plays most of them 40, and they have a game again tonight against Miami at home. So they have to fly home in the middle of the night and now suit up against the number one team in the East again. God forbid this game goes into overtime. I love Nurse. I'm starting to get really concerned with how many minutes he's playing these guys. When April comes around, or even hopefully for them, May comes around.
Yeah.
Are they going to have enough gas in the tank?
Yeah. Well, we can talk about this tomorrow.
Doug Smith. We have Doug Smith coming on.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be good.
Yeah.
Well, we shall. I apologize for being premature.
And I'm sure those 500 fans at Scotiabank Arena tonight will really appreciate that starting lineup playing 40 minutes again.
Can you explain to me why it's only 500, but restaurants are half open?
Nope. I can't explain why you can put 1,000 people in a shopping mall and you can only put 500 people in a hockey arena.
Well, I've been to a few shopping malls with 1,000 people in them too.
I know.
Makes no sense. Well, a lot of the things that we discuss make no sense.
We're good at it.
A lot of the things we say make no sense. But we'll make no sense again tomorrow. Hope you'll join us for that. For John Shannon McCowan. See ya.